Okay, Bio 100 team, thanks for clicking. Let's turn all of that self-reflection we did in 13.1 and put it to some practical use here in 13.2, which we're going to call performing a little bit of market research. We got to figure some things out. Let's do it. All right, learning outcomes for this video. What we're going to do is go online. We'll do it together. We'll perform some research about various industries. We're going to learn about areas of the country. I know, there are other states beyond California that you might love living in, and you might not even know it just yet. And within industries, within markets, what are the specific companies? You might have absolutely no idea where to start. I wouldn't have either. Hopefully this video gets you a little bit closer. We want to then, once we've done some market research, help you stay organized. Organization will absolutely set you free, and we want to give you a couple of quick tips on how to maintain a really good approach throughout this process, which, as we talked about in the last video, takes time. It takes time, it takes organization, it takes those 3 P's that we talked about. Let's get at it. Let's start this journey together by thinking about different places to live. Thinking about different places to live really requires a good game plan. Dare I say, defining values, thinking about personal and professional growth, establishing a timeline. Sound familiar from video 1? I hope so. You know, I'm not from California. I grew up in Ohio. I mentioned living in Japan. My life has absolutely been enriched, and I'm forever grateful for the opportunities to live in different places. Eating new foods, thinking in new ways based on different people's approaches to life. I'll look back on those and forever be extremely thankful. It's definitely played a role in both my personal and professional growth. It's time to think about yours and think about your comfort zone. Think about where you're willing to go. You might not have a clue about any other place to live. We're going to teach you how to think about those places. I certainly didn't know anything about other places besides Ohio. I lived in that bubble, and I had to figure it out. And I understand if you do too. We're going to focus on the U.S., although I do want to point out that there are wonderful places abroad as well to study, perform graduate research, get a job, go to medical school, all the things you might think about. There's plenty of places, but we're going to focus here in the U.S. One of the main reasons is just a simple exercise in biomath, and that is that the more places you're willing to look at, the more opportunities you will find. The more opportunities you find, the more you can apply, and therefore increase your odds of getting into that dream opportunity. Getting from point A to point B is absolutely empowered, and the odds are increased the more you apply. It's a simple numbers game. Looking at more markets gives you more opportunities to do just that, from getting A to getting to B. It should be noted that each city has strengths and weaknesses for its markets in terms of your strengths and weaknesses and your interests. If you're wanting to go into biotechnology, Sacramento currently isn't the best market. It isn't even a great market. I don't even think it's a good market. And you need to hear these things because it will absolutely help you think about the choices and the goals you define. It also helps you think about what potential compromises you might make. If living in Sacramento is absolutely the number one thing, then it might take a little bit of flexibility in terms of your thinking about the job you might want to make that happen. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with staying in Sacramento. Many of you have very compelling reasons to do so. Potentially, you are serving as a caretaker for lots of lineages of your family that live here, and you just can't move out and just pick up and go, and that's fine. That's understandable. You might have kids well established in a school system. No one's telling you that you have to or judging you if you don't. This is just an exercise in exploring opportunities and increasing your odds to get to the career or grad program that you're saying that you really, really, really want. So we have to know where to look. The first thing I recommend is asking questions to Dr. Googs, and I mean Google, and getting good answers requires asking good questions. So we're going to talk about this in this market research video. I'm going to point out some regional resources relative to particular states or cities or regions within states that you might not have known about, and then how to keep current with that information by signing up for alerts. You could do this via email, for example, and also using Twitter to stay current. I don't use Twitter to send out messages that I write, but I do have an account so that I can follow, among other things, scientific journals, so I can learn about research findings. And you could use it to find information about job postings, and you're going to see some content in this video related to that. And one of the things I really, really like in terms of learning about areas of the country is by looking at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a phenomenal resource. Let's say you're interested in learning about Minneapolis. That's in Minnesota. That's a state. That's far away, and I understand. But boy, does it have some good biotech. It has a lot of good healthcare. I learned that by looking at Wikipedia. So among the other things you can think about as you're considering your values, considering your comfort zone, are the demographics. What is it like to live in Minneapolis? What's the climate like in Minneapolis? Well, if you took a peek, you'd learn that it's very cold there in the winters, and it snows. It snows a lot. I don't mean driving to Tahoe to find snow. I mean, you're going to have a foot to 10 foot snow blast right outside your front door many, many times. That might be a deal breaker. I understand. What's the climate like? What's the culture like? What are activities? What are events? What do people do in these places? You can absolutely learn about professional and social opportunities by looking at Wikipedia. You can also look at Wikipedia to learn about the companies that are in these cities. You'll see the major industries listed, and then you can click on them and learn a lot about them. Otherwise, you might not have a clue as to where to start. So, city searching on Wikipedia is a phenomenal tool. Let's fire up an example, and let's take you to a place that's not so drastically different in the winter. Because I know how you feel. I get it. You guys really don't even know what winter is if all you know is Sacramento. In terms of snow and cold, that is. I actually call winters here summer junior, but that's a different story. Let's go to Research Triangle Park. That sounds like a magical fairy tale land, but no, it's a real region of the country, and it's in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina is on the East Coast, so I'm taking you from the West Coast to the East Coast. And there's a couple reasons for that. And it's not just because it gives me a quick moment to remind you of the 90s battle for rap supremacy between Tupac on the West Coast and Biggie on the East Coast. It ended in tragedy, but we should move on. The reason I'm actually pointing this out is because of the professional opportunities, which I'm going to go through, and the fact that its climate is pretty darn close to this one in a lot of ways. It's more humid, to be certain. However, the temperatures are mild, it's near an ocean, it's near mountains. Feels a lot like this region, if you ask me. And it's a great place for young professionals. It's also a great place for young professionals who have kids, or young professionals who have a dual household income and need to consider two different industries. That's also absolutely a consideration. Pairs of individuals might be in different sectors within a household and therefore have to consider two different careers. That's not always easy in every single market. Research Triangle Park is one of those markets. Quickly scanning here, you learn that it's actually named for 3 hub cities, Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, each of which have major research universities, and all of these locations have an extremely advanced and growing technology sector. Companies are flocking to North Carolina. You can find all about them right here on Wikipedia. In fact, Research Triangle Park has its own website, has its own Twitter account, and has tons of other resources that you can use to find out more information and stay current with it. As with most things wiki, you get a little bit of history, you learn about the culture and government, you learn about what's there to do, you learn about all of the companies, you can click on them from here, and you even learn more about those universities and colleges. So don't be afraid to go to Wiki and start just by looking at different cities around the country. Congratulations! You looked at a map, you identified some cities you'd be willing to look at, you performed some research through Wikipedia or other websites, and you learned about those places. Online. Exclusively online. It's time to actually now think about cost of living, which is a very important consideration that I think all of our values need to consider. Online research is great. Visiting is even better. I'm going to give a little plug here to the website Airbnb, not because I work there or because I think it's necessarily great, but because it's a helpful one if you want to take a trip to a place, stay in a location, within a neighborhood, within a community, and not just at a hotel, and really get a feel for what the lay of the land is like and what the cost of living might look like. You could do this as research, and you can absolutely do this if you're scoping out a graduate program or a job that you got an offer for. Go ahead and stay in the place for up to a week, let's say, if you have a chance to do that, to get a good feel for what might be around you on a day-to-day basis, should you make a big move in your life. And if you're going to do that move, something like this allows you a transitionary experience so that you don't have to feel like you necessarily need to find a place to rent or buy from afar before you get there. You can go ahead and find a place through Airbnb, stay there for a little while you drive around neighborhoods that are new and identify a place to live within that community. So that probably felt like a step ahead of the game, and I totally understand. So let's take a step back and let's just continue the thread of doing some online research. None of you guys are in a position right now where you're going to go pick up and move. You're still in the process of earning your degree right here at Sac State. And so let's look at Zillow, another website that I do not work for, but that I like in terms of doing some research, finding out what cost of living is. And we're going to explore, as you can see up here in the top left, the ability to look at rentals within a particular area. So up there, I'll click on rent, and then I can enter in Sacramento, California in the search bar. That will take me to lots of hits, which we'll see here. Here's Sacramento. I love it. We love Sac. I got 1 bedroom set as my search parameter. I could have been more specific as I wanted. As you can see up at the top, there are places to refine by price, by home type, and a whole slew of others if you clicked on more. But we're going to keep this simple for this quick comparison, which I'm about to make. The blue outline on the map on the left can be removed if you wanted to see more broadly offerings in Citrus Heights and Fair Oaks. Each of the purple dots is a clickable either apartment complex or home or townhouse that might be on the market for rent. On the right-hand side of this search tool, you see pictures that are also clickable. And when you click on, pull up a lot more details about a current location. For comparison, look at this search below. This user has decided to expand their radius to Columbus, Ohio. It's important to notice that cost of living in different markets is different. That might sound completely expected, but you might not know how big those differences are. It can cost half as much to live in one location versus another. And I'm not going to go into any details about these particular examples, and you see 4 of them on the page. But you might be surprised that salaries for a particular field don't necessarily come with cost of living adjustments. Therefore, $50,000 in location A and $50,000 in location B might buy you very different things if the cost of living in one of those locations is twice the other. And it's not just that the cost of living is twice as much. You could actually get more for your money in a place like Columbus in terms of square foot of the property. You can get acres of land. You can have more bedrooms, more bathrooms for a fraction of the cost, and that might really appeal to your values. And it might not, and that's okay too. But it's worth looking, and it's worth really thinking about and stretching your imagination. We mentioned up at the top of this video that places have regional or city-specific tools. If you were really focused on Sacramento, for example, you could Google Sacramento rental market, let's say, or Sacramento places to rent. And absolutely, Dr. Googs will direct you to Zillow and other places like that. It also might find something like this. This is sacrentals.com. This is obviously a specific resource for Sacramento. I actually think this is a fantastic resource. It allows you to click on, like many others, bedroom numbers, or even neighborhoods. You can see down there in the boxes with pictures several examples of places that are currently on the market. So you might want to take your searching away from the main search engines provided by national brands like Zillow and become a little bit more local here. Most markets have this tool. It just takes a quick Google search to find the right web address. Another great resource to look at how much it would cost to actually put a roof over your head is Craigslist. I will say one caveat is that Craigslist does have some spammy material in here and therefore is a little tougher to sort through than some of the other ones. But again, it's a very good tool for looking at places. And you can see here, I've entered Sacramento for the apartments and housing market. And on the left, there are lots of ways to customize your search. One recommendation from this person here is to click on those that have an image. That often tends to not only sort through the clutter, but obviously give you a visual representation of what a place might look like. And you can be more specific about setting your price and setting the distance maybe from a particular zip. Let's say you want to think about how long your commute time to a particular job or grad school might look like. Maybe you have pets and you want to make sure your furry friends can travel along with you. You can see filters for cats or dogs. Maybe you don't have your own furniture and maybe you're going to be in a place short term and so you'd like a furnished unit. All of these things and more are available for you to customize a search. And that's one of the great things about the internet and these kinds of places in general, is the ability to really, really be refined. So start broad, see what hits, and then add filters until you're comfortable. And all this is well and good, but you also need a little more context. Just because a place is less expensive in one market versus another doesn't necessarily mean you know what your budget would look like when you consider all other things as well. Food costs are different in certain places, insurance, gas that you put in your car. The list goes on and on. So to feel like you have a really good idea about knowing how far your money might go, depending on the salary you might be making, And we'll talk about salary expectations in a bit. I recommend places like NerdWallet. Kind of funny name, but very, very effective. Here is their cost of living calculator. And you see here a very customizable drop-down menu friendly list of things to filter. So I currently live in, and you can click on the city. I want to live in, and then you can click on a different city, and your current pre-tax household income. So for example, they have 50,000 here. This is really nice because it gives you not only the data for the place you're interested in looking, but it allows you to consider the fact you might be moving from somewhere, and what would that change to your dollar, to your wallet actually be when you pick up and move with the same salary? How does your life change? We all have our values. We've defined them. To finish out this example, let's put in, I currently live Sac Town, California, home of the Kings, and I want to move to Columbus, Ohio, home of the no NBA team, but they do have the NHL's Columbus Blue Jackets, and you might not care about any of that. But what really you might care about is the dollars, and so we're going to keep $50,000 as just a sort of example cost. What you find here is that to maintain your standard of living in Columbus, you'd have to earn $39,000. That's a 21% reduction in your overall cost of living. So that is how much further your money would go if you lived in that location. It really breaks down for you, and you can actually set more filters based on all of these categories below. For example, housing costs. The median 2-bedroom apartment in Sac is $1,898 versus $1,098 in Columbus. The median home price for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath at the current market is $436,000 in Sacramento, and a huge difference to Columbus at $268,597. Overall, the housing, rent, and home prices for purchase are 39% lower. And as you can see in these other categories, the transportation, food, entertainment, and healthcare costs in Columbus are all lower, some by 31%, such as transportation, and some only slightly lower, like entertainment, which is only 4% different. So clearly, the big differences here are the housing and transportation costs. The food is also cheaper. The healthcare is also cheaper. The entertainment is about the same, at 4% lower. These categories and these differences will help you understand what you're willing to do, what you're willing to compromise on, as you, with your values, think about where your life would like to be and where you want to spend your money. So we've thought about where to live, cost of living, and tools to help you learn about it. Let's move on to the second criterion in identifying industries. You might not have any idea about what industry you might want to do at all right now, and so we need online research for that as well. Remember, the biology degree is not a one-size-fits-all thing. You all can do lots of different things with this degree, and you all will do lots of different things with this degree, but we need to help you understand what it might mean. Dr. Googs is again a great resource, and so let me start with a question that I've asked Google here that you might want to know as well. Perhaps your goal is to do some sort of biotechnology research, have a lab position in a biotech company. I want to know, what are the top biotech markets so I can marry the geography with the opportunities that might exist. And here you're going to learn that biotech is a word that encompasses a lot of types of jobs. There's profit and nonprofit companies. That is going to be really important in just a few moments. Okay, we've consulted Dr. Googs, but I also promised a regional resource, maybe one that you can sign up for email alerts through and even follow on Twitter. I present to you the fantastic biospace, which brands itself as the home of the life sciences industry. And as biology majors, that's where you are. So I want to show you a couple of cool features of this website and how you can make it part of your day. For one, you can search jobs by title, keyword, or even company name. You can enter in Columbus, Ohio, or Research Triangle Park, Sacramento, California, San Diego, California, Paris, France, and do a search right there through the bars at the bottom. You can also, through any of the tabs you see here across the horizontal top space, look at biospace provided materials related to news articles, job alerts, all sorts of career resources, and something we're going to go through, hotbeds. You don't have to click on any of those tabs to get started. If you were to just scroll down the website, about halfway down the page, you're going to see these white, blue, and red boxes. The white and the blue ones are for you as searchers. And so this involves signing up for alerts to stay current. On the left, it's their news blurbs. And this is going to be general information about science itself related to, let's say, cancer discoveries or Parkinson's disease research, careers in general, and various other pieces of information that they provide in what's called an e-newsletter. There's some also very helpful tips for customizing resumes and things that they do send out. In blue, it says get personalized job alerts. And so this is an email alert system that is a lot more targeted to specific keywords and job titles that you think you really, really want to follow up on. And so that might be a little too specific for now, but it might be just perfect after we get through the next video series. On the bottom, you see links that you can click on under for more information about the company, things like that. We're going to talk about an RSS feed in a moment. You can see that there too. And then all these little hotbeds. And I see Bio Indiana, I see Genetown, I see Biotech Bay. This sounds hot. I want to know about it. Let's keep going. Let's say you clicked on Biotech Bay. That happens to be the location of hotbed for life sciences jobs closest to where you are now. It says at the bottom right, celebrating 30 years, Biotech Bay, 1989 to 2019. That's exciting. This map that you see here, this cool cartoon, shows you almost all of the biotech companies that exist in the Bay Area. You see East Bay, you see the Peninsula, you see South Bay, you see everything from Merck to Gilead to Amgen to BioMarin. Wow, this is fantastic. It even gives you like little cool arrows with mileage distances to other hotbeds. And if you look in the middle there, it says, hey, if you wanted to go to Genetown, that's 3,000 miles away. If you wanted to go to Farm Country, PHARM, not FARM, and that is not a FAT versus PHAT joke. It actually is farm for pharmaceuticals, not farm for corn growing. Although corn growing could be for pharmaceuticals, but that's a different show. That's about 2,800 miles away. I just love pictures. I just love this little map. It's updated very frequently. All the hotbeds have this little map to show you spatially where these companies might be existing. Each biospace hotbed gives you a little razzle-dazzle, a little reason to want to be there, a little recruitment pitch. I just copied a little bit of it here for you. There's a lot more on the website. Why, it says here, should you choose SF and in particular Northern California? Well, first of all, it is a hotbed in terms of the number of companies, over 3,000 to choose from. Those are good odds. How many actual people are employed in this industry in Northern California's San Francisco region? Well, almost 100,000. That's a strong workforce. And importantly, what's the average annual wage per person? And this is currently $116,000, which again now depends on a couple of things. your level of education and training, how long you've been with the company, and is a dollar value that you may or may not feel comfortable with, depending on where you fit, living in a very expensive region like San Francisco. The cool thing about Biospace is you can go way beyond that cartoon map and that catchy little recruitment pitch of numbers to actually look at a real map with real-time information about the companies and the jobs within those companies. So you see here the Biotech Bay. This is Google Maps. You can scroll in and look at each little region you want. And as you do, on the right-hand side, it will change the companies you see listed. So on the right, currently, you can scroll, if you're on the website, up and down that side between any of those companies, like I mentioned, for example, Merck and Amgen. Let's see what happens when we click on Amgen. We can really start doing some market research for ourselves. We can really start learning about these companies. We can see where they're headquartered, and that indicates to you that there's more than one location, and that's nice because if you really are interested in Amgen and you don't want to live in San Francisco, there are options outside there. And here's the website, and you can go to their specific jobs tab and see all the different regions they have opportunities. What you see first and foremost, and what you see first and foremost with each company, is a mission statement. And theirs clearly says it's to serve patients. It's the first thing. They've set it off with little hyphens right up there at the top. It says that it drives all they do. That might absolutely inspire and appeal to your values. And that's why that first video in defining who you are was so important. Because believe it or not, companies define these things too. There's a lot of information you can find here, and I'm only showing you the top of the page. If you were on the Biospace page for Amgen and you scroll down, you'd see all sorts of information, including open opportunities and skills that the company values to have in you when you're trying to fill those jobs. But right at the top, it's simply about the company, and we're talking about performing research about the company at the moment. So you learn that they collaborate, and I think that's a very important thing. It says that they're a values-based organization right there in the third paragraph. That's how they kick it off. And they aim as such to make positive impacts on the world. Again, that's very exciting, and Amgen does indeed do that. Here's links for their careers, and then also they provide helpful information through the links below. LinkedIn and Twitter. And we're going to have a whole video series on LinkedIn to come, so hang on to that one. You see the top there with that person's forehead of a YouTube video. They too made a video about their company. So no matter how you like to process information, whether that by reading or by watching, they've got you covered. Another map they've made for you is one showing all of the hotbeds across the country as you see in front of you. This is really nice. So look, if you're a West Coaster, you prefer Tupac, you can look all the way through Oregon and Washington. If you look over on the East Coast, you might notice that there are a ton of opportunities all the way from Massachusetts down to North Carolina. The Midwest is no exception, as you see Indiana and Chicago, St. Louis, and other regions like Minnesota. Minneapolis up there at the top has tons of opportunities. This isn't to say that there are no opportunities in places other than these. There are certainly lots of jobs in other cities not within these hotbeds. But it is good to know when you're thinking about the numbers game that, again, certain cities have more opportunities than others. That becomes really nice too when you think about the fact that, on average, a biotech career involves a couple of job changes, a couple of moves between companies. So if you, let's say, fall in love with Chicago and you want to live there forever, but you might have to change jobs at some point, it's good to be in a city with lots of opportunities to expand and to grow over time. If you get a great job in one city and there's not a lot of other companies there and you want to move around to a different company, and there's not a lot of places to go in that city, you might be looking at a geographical move. So that's important to consider when you think about hotbeds and long-term livability in a particular place based on other opportunities. As a comparison point for the data shown to you already in the hotbed that was the Northern California, San Francisco region, I'm going to put up Research Triangle Park again in North Carolina. And you'll see that there are a ton of companies, a ton of workers, and that the average wage per person is about $84,000. And you might stop there and think, oh, but that's less than San Francisco. And it was. But just remember, the cost of living difference between those two places is significant. And you can go online to NerdWallet and compare those two locations for yourself to see how much you'd be saving in other areas of your life by living here and how much further that wage could go. Now that I know that you're intrigued by North Carolina, I could just hear it through the computer somehow, even though you haven't even watched this yet. I'm going to put up here the biospace city-specific region for Research Triangle Park. Same thing that you see a map that you can zoom in and out of with opportunities on the right-hand side to learn about companies, to follow companies, to subscribe to their alerts, and to see what jobs they have. And since we keep talking about job alerts, let's look at how customizing one for biospace looks. Of course, it's asking for your email address, and it gives you an opportunity to do job title, keywords, or companies, just like we talked about. You can search by different locations, and what's neat is you can get different alerts for different locations. So you can do one for Northern California, and you could do another one for Chicago, and you could do another one for the Research Triangle Park area. It's fantastic. You can click on different disciplines. Maybe you're really now interested in learning about marketing. Did you know that biotech companies and hospitals and all sorts of places where biologists are employed need biologists to do marketing, to convey to the public important information? And that might be something that's of high interest to you all of a sudden that you didn't even know you could do with your degree. This allows you to customize a particular component of the whole enterprise. Quality control is a great one. Vacaville, just down the road, has a biotech company called Genentech, which has multiple locations. The Genentech based in Vacaville is all quality control, whereas the one in South San Francisco is much more research-based. These things are good to know, and you're going to figure these things out as you continue to learn about the companies and do a little research. As you scroll down, you see more opportunities to customize your email alert. You can click on the different hotbeds. You can click on the frequency with which you want to be sent these pieces of information. Obviously, the drop-down menu is going to give you more options. Currently, it's set to daily. That'd be a lot of information, and so you don't have to do something as frequently as that, but they give you other options. And then they give you, at the very, very bottom, ways to kind of interact with the scientific community in different ways than just jobs. So I'd like to receive communications about career events and opportunities. That's really nice. Maybe there's a career fair, a job fair going on in your area. They'll let you know about it. Maybe it's an opportunity to bring a resume by and get to know people at a company and do some networking, which we will talk about in the next video. Before we leave the Biospace website, I want to show you what it looks like when you click on the Jobs tab. And it says at the top left, Browse Life Sciences Jobs. You don't have to be so targeted by region or by hotbed. You can just go ahead in here and do a search, a customizable one in fact, with all sorts of ways to refine it on the left-hand side for whatever you might be thinking about. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here showing you how to search jobs through this portal, because we're going to do that in two other ways, two of what I think are the preferred ways, which are Indeed and LinkedIn. Those are going to be two different videos ahead. Now, I want to show you here because it's good to know that there are other ways to do it on this Biospace website. But for my money, this is more of a researching tool. to learn about the markets, to identify the areas of the country that have opportunities, to see what companies are there, and to read about their missions so that you can see, based on what they do and how much they pay you, what aligns with your values or not. But this is nice to see that you can customize an individual job search on the same toolbox if you wanted to. I will point out that, as I mentioned to start this section, that on the left-hand side, you can search by a different industry. It's important to know that biotech doesn't just mean one thing. There are academic sectors, there are diagnostic ones, there are some that are profit, as I mentioned, or nonprofit. There's some that are involved with making medical devices themselves, some that are pharmaceutical based. And so this is going to allow you to think to yourself, okay, do I want to develop products? Do I want to market products? Do I want to work for a nonprofit? What are your goals? What gets you excited? What makes you inspired? Here's an opportunity to apply your goals and apply your values within a search. And that's really nice. Okay, market research began with a little bit of geography. Where are we going to go? It continued with what are the industries and what are the industry types? Let's dig a little deep further and go into the companies themselves. We showed you ways through Biospace to look at different companies and click on them. I want to give you a couple of examples for when you leave that Biospace website and you go to Amgen or any other company, what you're going to see and how you can learn from it and how you can do this quickly. So we want to visit the websites to learn about mission. We want to visit the websites to learn about company vision, because on a day-to-day basis, when you're doing these jobs and you're putting in long hours and it's stressful, and in science, as you know now from your lab classes, things don't work, and that's very taxing on one's mental health and feeling about their job or their classes or their progress. It's very important at the end of the day that you do feel like what you're working for matters, and that the people you work with matter too, and that you're all trying to build something towards a collective goal, aka mission or vision. The example I'm going to give you to start with is the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And you can see here what they, when you click on their website, list as their promise, which is really their mission or vision. You can see a video at the bottom to click on to learn more about the company. So again, most companies are going to have written and video indicators of what they do and why they do it. What do they do? Well, it's really nice to see it spelled out plainly. It's dedicated to finding a cure for Parkinson's disease through an aggressively funded research agenda and to ensure the development of improved therapies for those with Parkinson's today, combining, if you think about it, the magic of bench science with the promise of helping people. And those might be two values that you define for yourselves. This is a nonprofit. That might have been something that was important to you as well. It's important to point out here that Michael J. Fox was in arguably one of the best movies of all time, Back to the Future. And you might not have seen that. And that makes me sad. And I'll just say here, very quickly, that the original script called for a time machine that was not the DeLorean, but was actually a refrigerator. True story. They actually pitched a script where they would travel through time by going into a refrigerator. Crazy. If you keep scrolling down their website, you see further indicators of the way they do things and why they do the things they do. They put patients first. They tell you our model is different and why. And again, it's kind of based on that combination of translational bench and bedside. Sometimes you only get one or the other. And it says who we are. We're risk takers and problem solvers. This is so important. All of this is so important. You want to be inspired. You want to see if it's a good fit. And they want to make sure it's a good fit too. So when you see little things like this, we are risk takers and problem solvers, they want you to be one too. And they want you to demonstrate that you are one when you apply through your resumes, through your personal letters, personal statements, cover letters, I should say, and we're going to talk about those materials later. And so remember, when you're researching companies, it's not just to figure out, do I like this company? Do I like what they do? But it's also to learn what they do so that you can show them that you're the same and that you value those same things. The last bit of market research we want to perform as we think about where we're heading is within these locations, within these industries, at these companies. What are the job titles? Let's get to the nitty-gritty. What do we actually need to be looking at when we're thinking about job titles that apply to us? And while we're looking, in the age of the internet and social media and being able to provide feedback on everything we do, why couldn't we be able to do this for how satisfied employees might be about working at a company? And there are tools for this, as you might have imagined. I mean, if you can go onto Yelp and relate to the public how you felt about a burrito and that it didn't have enough black beans for your taste, that important information you must convey to the world immediately. I know. Why would we live in the dark about how it feels to work at a company, how people perceive their benefits to help their lives, what it's like to work with the management group? Is the vision of the company that's stated on the website actually being modeled by the leaders at the company and the employees? You can see lots of data online about all these things. So we're going to teach you here in the last bit of this video to peruse the relevant places to do so, because there's a few, and they all say something a little different, right? Everybody has a different opinion, and sometimes the data on Site 1 and Site 2 need to be kind of compiled a little bit. Maybe you have to kind of average in your mind this data. Maybe don't look at the extremes of what's always great or always terrible, but something in the middle that, again, provides you context for what's good and bad. We want to do this. We want to look at comments from search engines, including Glassdoor, Indeed, and LinkedIn. And this is actually not going to be all covered in this video, but a little glimpse into where we're headed for the rest of the semester. Indeed is going to be its own video, and LinkedIn will be as well, and it won't be covered in this week. That's what's ahead. All these platforms can be used for all of the above. So to finish out this video, we're going to focus on Glassdoor. I'm not sure if you've heard of Glassdoor before, but when you go to the website, you see all sorts of different options to interface with it, including looking at jobs. It's yet another way to look at jobs. Reviews of the company, what the salaries are like, a couple of other fun ones. Tips to prepare for interviews given by people who went on interviews, and what you can expect for in terms of salary. And so we're going to get into each of these. Let's do a little research about a company we saw on Biospace, one that was in San Francisco. I've put it up there in the search bar. It's called Novartis, and it's a fantastic company with research labs in multiple locations throughout the country, including in Emeryville. And you can see some here listed on the left as the jobs pop up for the company, including Morris in Plains, New Jersey, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and elsewhere. This allows you a lot of customizing in terms of looking at different job types, when they were posted, salary ranges, etc. But what I really want to point out is not any one specific job, which we'll actually do in a later video, but ways to actually learn about the company in terms of these specific positions. So on the right-hand side, this data scientist position is posting, okay? And you can see more ways to learn about the job itself, but also the company, how it's rated, what salary expectations you might have for this job, and reviews and benefits. And this is really important for a lot of reasons, not just what you want to do, but many companies during an interview will say, what are your salary expectations? And you need to know where to start, and you need to know what's fair, and you need to know how to negotiate too. And we'll talk about these things. So this is what this looks like. This is the company entered on the left, Novartis, all the jobs that pop up. let's take a look at the company reviews. Let's click on that one. Here's what you see. They found over 3,200 reviews. That's a lot of data to look at. On average, out of 5 stars, employees have rated Novartis as a 3.8. 74% recommended to friends. That's only 3/4 of the workers. So 3 out of every 4 say, yeah, I would absolutely recommend this job. 88% approve of the leadership. And what's kind of neat in this quick hit overview of the company is that it pulls out the top 2 pros and the top 2 cons that have been most mentioned within those 3,000 reviews. And so if you look at the pros, it says, quote, best work-life balance. And that was 354 times mentioned. Work-life balance is very important. It's important to stay physically and mentally healthy. It's important to, in the context of your personal values, what you want to be outside of the job, it's important to think about how balanced you're able to be. How much time can you spend outside work enjoying your life? Well, take it from the horse's mouths here. There are real employees, current and former, giving you insight on what it's like. Another pro, good work environment and flexible timings. That's really nice. It was mentioned over 100 times, and we mentioned work environment in your values as well. How do you like to be trained? How do you like to interact with your coworkers? Work environment is very important when you're spending 8 hours or more a day with the same people that aren't your family. And here's where it gets confusing because, as you can see in the cons, work-life balance is challenging. So you have that as both a pro and a con. Therefore, we have to dig a little deeper, and we are, to look at individual reviewers and see why some people rated this as a pro and some rated it as a con. So this can be challenging, just like it is Amazon or any other place you're reading reviews. In fact, I never even know what's real on Amazon anymore with all these fake reviews. Another con it says is that it's a huge company which causes long process and times to make decisions. And that's important to think about too. Big companies versus small companies. The bigger the company you have, you're one of many. The smaller companies, well, sometimes you feel that your voice is heard more. Sometimes you think things go quicker because it's a little more exploratory, whereas a big company is kind of bound to its traditions and rules and regulations. And so you're seeing that here too. As you do company research, think about the size. Just like you might have thought about the size of the school you're attending right now. The CSU campus of Sacramento has about 30,000 students, a little more than that. I went to a school that had over double that and was one of the largest in the whole country. And I had reasons for that, and you do too. So think about it. It's important to read multiple reviews and see how people are feeling. It's also important to have already defined your values so you can ask yourself, well, is a con for this person a con for me? Maybe I don't mind that. Is a pro for this person a pro for me? Maybe that's not so important. So here's a couple of examples. This person's worked at Novartis full-time for more than 8 years. They rate pros as good salary, good benefits. They like the campus that they work at. They keep rating the location here and some of the other perks. And if you click on any of these things, you can learn what those benefits and perks are through this interface here on Glassdoor. They also list cons: politics, who you know, weird culture, disrespectful associates, and people think the world revolves around them. Those are very interesting and insightful things to say. Now, if you notice that this is said by a lot of people, well, Houston, we have a problem. I don't think anybody wants to work in an environment like that. If this is just one-off and one disgruntled person, you might think to yourself, well, they say these things and yet they've been there for more than 8 years. There must be a lot more pros to outweigh those cons potentially to keep them there for that long. And if you're not seeing these cons listed in a lot of other places, well, maybe they're an outlier in the data set. Here's a second example of what would be a positive review, and you can see clearly that, just like the last one, this person would recommend a job at Novartis to a friend. They've been here a little less than the previous reviewer, and it says 3 years. Are we seeing any differences and similarities in the pros and cons? Well, let's look at the pros. Strong commitment to culture, employee resource groups, and developmental events. Wow, that sounds great. And it does sound like the previous commenter. Culture, and importantly, employee resource groups and developmental events, meaning you're not just stuck at the job doing the same thing forever and ever. They're providing you with ways to train and to grow and to feel like you're doing something new over time instead of just the same thing day over day, year over year. Wide range of developmental opportunities mentioned yet again, and excellent benefits, which was something the previous person said. So, hey, we're 2 for 2 on a couple of important pros. That's great. Cons. Layers can slow decision at times, but this is a challenge for many multinational organizations, and that's something we touched on. The bigger the company, the more layers you have, sometimes things can be slow. That might not be a problem to you at all. That might be something that is just hunky-dory to you. You're completely happy and fine to do things at the pace that they're being asked to, even if it's not lightning speed. Maybe that's actually a pro. So, what are your goals? What are your values? And how do you think they relate to what other people are saying? Well, if we're going down this rabbit hole, we of course have to find something that contrasts. This person is one of the 1 out of 4 non-recommenders, the 25% of employees who do not recommend working here to other people. They have a large data set of experience. It says they've been full-time for more than 10 years. Pros. Benefits are great. That's 3 out of 3. So kudos to the HR department for getting that right. Cons. The company is driven by the commercial leadership, many of whom do not have a medical or science background and are making decisions according to their business class textbooks. Not a good fit for a company that makes medicines, not widgets. So that's interesting. That's a second comment about sort of the overarching pace or direction or decision making of the company. And that may or may not be a conflict with the values and the goals that you define for yourself. We'll leave it to you. Importantly, the Glassdoor interface allows you to experience what it's like to interview at a company. And so let's pick one that kind of fits where you guys are. You might be currently applying for internships at different places. This is a perspective of an intern who interviewed at, as you can see here, the Emeryville, California location of Novartis. It tells you the outcome for this particular candidate. They did not get an offer. They applied and interviewed, but did not receive a yes acceptance from the company. They rate their experience as neutral and that the interview felt average. So, look at what you can learn here by looking at all these types of comments. Application. They applied through a college or university. You learn how the timeline looks. The process took a week. You learn that they interviewed on the campus itself. This one is a little bit older. It says April 2011. It gives you nuggets of information about the interview. The in-person interview consisted of 6 interviews taking about 20 to 30 minutes each. Wow, that's some key insight. The fact that it wasn't just one person and one sitting, but 6 different ones that each lasted 20 to 30 minutes. That's pretty intense. That's good to know before you walk in the door. It says what interviewers asked about. Well, their research background, their motivation, right? Their goals and why they want to do this. It says certain interviewers did not even talk about science at all, but only asked questions about my hobbies and my personality. Now, that is great, and that actually is a good sign that the company values work-life balance. It values your health. It wants to make a connection. It wants to see if you're a good fit, and it wants to make sure you know these things so that they want to do a little bit of recruiting on their end sometimes to make sure you want to be there. These are all really helpful things to see. We'll do one more example from the interview itself. And this person actually was given and accepted an offer, and therefore it's no shocker they think this was a positive experience. This took this candidate a little longer. They applied online and it took over 4 weeks. This one was a little bit closer to the peninsula. They did this on the SF campus, not the Emeryville one. And you get some similarities and differences in how this person interviewed. This is for a sales interview. So this person wasn't going for an internship. They actually had a degree and thought to themselves, boy, it would be cool to be a sales representative who works for the company on campus, answering phones, talking about the products they make, and then actually doing a little bit of traveling and going to academic and other biotech companies to educate people who are buying their equipment about it. That might sound really interesting to you, and you might not have ever heard of sales as an opportunity within biology to make a career. Interview says it was friendly, typical big pharma. Okay, we hear that a lot. 4-step interview process, starting with recruiter, hiring manager, concurring manager, and then RD, I don't know what that means. It says they got the job offer, they did career builder. And so this was actually nice because it gives you an idea that before they got to the campus to interview, they had to go through a couple of steps. And so they're right here for you, including the recruiter. We're going to talk about recruiters when we and hiring managers and these layers when we get to the LinkedIn section. And also you get the interview question, at least one of them. Tell me about a time when you finished a project. Boy, oh boy, does this give you a lot to think about, right? How would you answer that question? And think of all the layers that it really represents, both your resiliency to get the project done, a little bit of explanation of the expertise about the skill set that you use to get it done. They can learn a lot about your personal and your professional skills through questions like that. One of the most common uses of Glassdoor is by clicking on the Salaries tab. This is kind of how they got their start. People wanted to know, all right, if I worked at a company, if I had a particular job title, what would I get paid? And that's still there, and it's still important, as they've built the platform to include other things like the reviews we showed. So you can search by job title, you can search by location. You can see that right here. It's also embedded in the jobs that you see, and we did this a couple of slides before, when you had the jobs listed on the left and you could click on one and see it on the right, you could click on the salaries there too. So there's a couple of ways to see this. One is through your search, or two, directly off of a job you might click on. Let's take a look. Now, I entered in lab assistant as my job title, and I'm going to talk about job titles in a different video and what you'd put in. So lab assistant, and I kept it to Sacramento because that's where we are. Boy, you sure get a lot of data here, okay? Average base pay is $32,000. Maybe that shocks you, but that's a starting biology bachelor's level degree for a lab assistant in Sacramento. $32,700 a year. They give you a range that, okay, this might be the average base pay, but it could go as low as $25,000 and as high as $44,000. So it's not necessarily going to be $32,000. On the right-hand side, they give you salaries for related job titles. And this is really nice because not only do you see the salaries, but you also learn new titles to search for when you're doing job searches. Clinical research assistant, lab technician, medical assistant, medical lab assistant, medical technologist. These are examples of other search terms you can use for getting related jobs. And you don't even have to go back into the search bar and enter it. You can click right on there. You can also see that there's a range of salaries. Let's go comparison shopping. How about a lab assistant in Columbus, Ohio? We've looked at a couple of markets and we've done a couple of consistent jobs now. Remember that it cost a fraction of what it did to live there based on benefits and transportation and entertainment. So housing and food and everything else was significantly less in Columbus, Ohio. You'll also notice that for this particular title, the average base pay is also a little bit less. It's $27,000. They're also telling you that they don't have a lot of data to give you a full range. It says not enough reports to show the distribution. It also says that it's about 4% below the national average salary-wise. Whereas if you may have noticed on the last slide, in Sacramento, it was 14% above the national average to be paid $32,000. So that gives you really good perspective at what the degree is going to get you for a lab assistant position across the country too, not just for these two locations. Similarly, on the right-hand side, you see salaries for related job titles. They're the same as the last slide, so I won't go through them. And ultimately, it's going to be up to you to do the math, to think about where you're comfortable with, based on average salaries and cost of living. We've spoken about knowing your value and knowing your worth. We asked you to define personal and professional goals to help you. But when it comes down to brass tacks, we also have to think about it in terms of a salary. So the last thing Glassdoor does is it gives you a really nice tool to get your estimate in terms of $1, meaning an annual salary. And again, this is very important because many companies will ask you to tell them what you think your worth is and gauge your knowledge of appropriateness for the salary expectations you have based on whether or not you did your homework. I'm not going to go through each of these little bits here, but I do want you to explore this, and you can get customized information for yourself based on lots of different locations and job titles. Glassdoor is fantastic for this. Wow, that was a lot and a ton of information that you're not going to remember tomorrow. So, organization will set you free. How do you stay organized with all of this data and all these things to keep track of? Well, we have to do the hard work of doing it. So, this is a one slide, final thought starter for how to keep track. And we're going to actually use this as part of our in-class activity. So one way you can do this is to take screenshots of the things you're learning and save PDFs to your computer. And you can create folders for different companies and job titles and be really organized as to the things you are seeing for company information and for salary expectations. It's good to do this early and often and save it for later, also to see how it changes over time. You might not be graduating for a couple of years, but it's good to know what companies are paying now and where it's going to be in a couple of years when you look then. Some markets might stay flat, some might go up. That's going to give you an indicator of what to expect when you get there. So save them. Save jobs, save job descriptions. We're going to talk about how you can base your coursework decisions on the job descriptions you see. Ultimately, we think keeping a spreadsheet is a great way to, and we've talked about keeping spreadsheets for data before, so organize data for yourself, for your job and career search. Here's some examples on how to keep organized in a spreadsheet. The little sheet tabs at the bottom, well, maybe you create, instead of sheet 1, sheet 2, geography titles. San Francisco, California is sheet 1. Columbus, Ohio is sheet 2. Research Triangle Park is sheet 3. Maybe the rows within any given sheet are going to be based on a job posting or a job title itself. And for any given job posting, you might need to create some columns with data. For example, columns might indicate the company name, the posting and or review date. It's important to know, and we're going to get into this in a later video, when the job was actually posted, how long it's been live. Was it a day? Has it been up there for 6 months? And when they're going to review applications. It's nice to have a column where you can copy and paste the link to apply to the job. If there's contact information, ways to list pros and cons that you've noticed in your market research, elements about cost of living, and any other notes that you think are really important to you. How do those job titles, how do those salary expectations, how do those pros and cons match your values? Create a little tab at the end, a little column at the end of all this for each of those to summarize your quick hit thoughts about how they do or don't meet your values so that you know where to go. That's the close of this one. I know it was long, but thanks for staying through, and I hope it's been helpful.